Hi there folks, today I am putting up a little more meat here. I've got a pork shoulder and a pork rump here, and I'm going to be making hams out of both of them. I'm going to talk today about curing, preserving, and smoking meats. This is a pretty simple process. It might sound a little tricky or complicated or a little bit dangerous, but really it's quite safe. There's only a few basic guidelines that you have to stay within. Now the whole point here is to have a meat product that you can turn into a shelf-stable product, so you don't need to keep it in the fridge. I can literally, when these are done, I can just hang them at room temperature and they are never going to go bad. And you can get around to eating them later when you get around to them. That's kind of the whole idea of putting up meat in the winter to last you through spring and into most of the summer before it comes time for butchering again. So there's two ways to preserve meat. You can wet preserve it or you can dry preserve it. Wet preserving, basically that means pickling. Something like you make a 50-50 vinegar water brine and you just chop the meat and throw it in the brine and it's good. I like a pickled meat, but it's not always what I want. I really prefer a nice dry aged, dry cured, shelf stable meat that way. Something like a ham or jerky, that kind of thing. So that's what we're doing today. We're doing dry preservation techniques. Dry preservation means, it means drying out, dehydrating. We do that with, with air, and we do that with a few chemicals that I'm using here. The only chemicals that I'm using today are salt and smoke. Those are my drying agents and my curing and even disinfecting agents. So salt, when I rub the salt in around these meats, the salt is going to start killing all the bacteria that's on the outside of the meat. It does a great job. It actually sucks the moisture out from the bacteria and they just die. So it starts as a kind of a disinfectant around the meats to get them clean. After that, the salt works to suck out moisture in the meat. I can remove a very high amount of the water in this meat just from rubbing salt on it and leaving it in the fridge for 2 weeks. At that point, once I've salted it and I've aged it up nice, either in the fridge or just somewhere in a nice cold environment, I'm going to go ahead and smoke them as my final preservation method. And the smoking itself also works to kill germs because smoke is acidic, about 4.6 to 4.5, I believe, on the pH scale, which is acidic enough to kill germs, kill most all bacteria. The acid helps to prevent the formation of dangerous bacteria in the meat as we lower that pH of the meat itself. So it helps. It's not foolproof, but it helps. It also is dry. It's not really heat in the smoker. I'm going to be running quite cold, something like 40 degrees, so almost refrigerator temperature. But the smoke itself is going to be quite dry, so that's going to help to suck a little more moisture out of the meat, and it puts a nice, like a film across the meat, so that even after all that, bacteria can't get into the meat because there's going to be a nice film of bacteria killing materials. See, smoke doesn't just kill bacteria because it's acidic. It also contains several compounds which are lethal or greatly reduce the capacity, the survival capacity and the reproduction capacity of most all bacteria. So when I combine the smoke and the salt plus the working to dry out the meat, it's basically, and it's an insanely shelf-stable product at that point, as long as you get it fairly dry all the way through. And that's what we're doing today, and let me show you how. Now, I misspoke a little bit. I said I was using just salt and smoke. I'm probably using a little sugar too. I like sugar. Sugar works very similar to salt. It kills bacteria. It helps to suck the moisture out of the meat in a little bit different way, but it still helps. And both the salt and sugar will penetrate deep into that meat and flavor the whole thing throughout. There's no need for injecting it. Injections are more for just keeping the flavor more even. When I do it this way, just with the rub on the outside, it'll be much stronger seasoned on the outside and more mild on the inside. But it's going to be all right. So how much salt do you use to salt cure a ham? I had a horrible time finding that out, so a lot of research and experiment told me anywhere between an ounce and ½ ounce is pretty much appropriate. When you're doing a dry rub, a lot of it tends to fall off a little bit, so going closer to 1 ounce is fine. Now you can do a pure salt, or you can do a 2 parts salt to 1 part sugar, which is what I have here. I guess I'll do one that way and one just the pure salt. You can just kind of pour it on. If you just pour it on, you're probably going to go too heavy. See here, I'm just pouring it on and rubbing it in. It's probably going to be too heavy. It's not bad. Really, it just means it's going to be stout. Yeah, let me get this on the cutting board instead of the towel. So, this one I'm just sprinkling it around. You don't need to just really cake it on. If I just rub it kind of evenly so there's kind of a coating all the way across, that's usually approximately 1 ounce per pound of meat I've found. At least, yeah, that's been about right. I guess I got a scrap here hanging off. Oh, we'll cure that too. Why not? So just get it everywhere, rub it in good, massage it in real great. Now, I didn't tell you at first, I think I missed that. Maybe I told you, maybe I forgot. You got to clean the meat first. Just give it a good rinse with water. And towel dry it. If you don't towel dry it, the salt and sugar and whatnots aren't going to stick. You don't need to use a store-bought curing powder. Basically, all that is salt with saltpeter in it, and you mix it down with more salt. You don't need the saltpeter, which is what you get in a curing powder. It can help, maybe. Basically, that turns into a food for a certain type of bacteria that creates, as a byproduct, lactic acid, which retards some kind of bad bacteria, listeria or something like that. So it can help that way, but the smoke will do the same thing, so I'm not concerned in the least bit. Plus, traditionally, most of these country-style hams aren't even smoked, they're just salted down. So we have that one. It's just rubbed down good. You probably can't even see it. It's starting to dissolve already. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to set it up in a bowl here and keep it cold. This is the... got a hair there. This is the curing process as the salt and sugar sucks out moisture from the meat, and as they penetrate into the meat itself, giving it a nice flavor. So moisture, the juices from the meat are going to be sucked out and they're just going to collect in the bowl here. I'm just going to pour them out halfway through the day and again tomorrow probably. And ideally, you're going to hang it up so that as it drips, it drips dry, it stays much drier, it's got better airflow. I don't have anywhere that I'm allowed to hang up a ham and let ham juice drip out, so I'm going to put it in a bowl, and you got to keep it cold during this stage. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the fridge. If it wasn't quite so freezing outside, I could put it outside, but if the meat freezes, that stops the curing countdown. So I'm going to cure this for about 3 days per pound. Now, once it's cured, which is the seasonings and the flavorings, the salts and the sugars are penetrated through down into the meat, and the moisture has been sucked out quite a bit by that, then I'm going to go ahead and smoke it for that additional preservation, that additional barrier against rot and bacteria. After that, I'm just going to make sure it stays cool as it finishes drying out. But at that point, it's going to be fairly shelf stable anyways. This one I want to be a little more scientific with. I want to weigh out how much I need here. Got my little kitchen scale. So I put a bowl on top, I can set something larger on it. Now I can still read here. Alright, this is a small shoulder. This is for my pot belly, so it's only about 2.5 pounds. Now, that means I'm going to need about 2 to 2.5 ounces of my cure here. So I'm just going to do pure salt on this one. Let's see here, how many tablespoons? That's about 3 rounded tablespoons, probably more like 4 strictly level tablespoons. So, yeah, and that's for 2.5 pounds here. I'm just going to sprinkle it on. See, this is actually fairly heavy. You don't really need this much. You can go down half as much if you want. It just means that if you use less salt, you're going to take longer in the drying out process later, so you got to make sure to keep the ham nice and cold, refrigerator temperature, as it dries out. Yeah, I don't honestly want all of that necessarily. I don't know, I'll go ahead and put it all. It's a pretty heavy dose. But just rub it in good. This one's going to be salty. I don't usually use that much, but I guess I'll try it this time. I've been using more like ½ ounce per pound. A lot of the salt will fall off as the juices from the water drip out of the ham. Actually, this one I put so much salt on, I can see it already starting to suck up moisture. With the sugar, yeah, I can see it kind of forming here. The meat starts to look like it's sweating a little bit. But just the pure salt, and I used a little more on this one, it seems like. At least it feels like it's more. Oh, got a hair. Yep, this is already starting to soak in the meat. So just suck out the water. Just make sure you get it in every nook and cranny, every crevice you can. Just rub it in good. Now, how do you know when this has become shelf stable? Basically, what we're looking for to be foolproof is dryness, how dry it is. Once it's lost 35% of its original weight, that's just from drying out, then we know it's shelf stable. So right at this point, I salted it down. Go ahead and weigh it, and you want it to be 35% of that weight, whatever that is, 35% less. Once you hit that point, it's dry enough now that you do not have to worry about any spoilage. It's going to be all right, especially because you've already got the salt soaked throughout it, a little sugar soaked throughout it. Both kill bacteria. I'm going to have that smoke on it. That smoke will penetrate quite deep into this meat too. Some of it will, which just helps to change the pH, so it kills and keeps the bacteria down. So I'm going to go show you the smoker setup in a minute here, but first, just to recap, you want about ½ ounce to 1 ounce of this curing mix, salt or sugar salt, ½ ounce to 1 ounce per pound of meat. I'm going to let it cure in a cool environment like a refrigerator or cold fall weather, not quite freezing winter weather. I'm going to let it cure for about 3 days per pound of meat, and after that, it's fairly shelf stable at that point, but you still want to keep it cool because just in case it wasn't all the way dried out from the salt and aging already. Well, now we're going to age it to get the more high-end classic ham flavor and texture, which is actually good bacteria that can survive the sugar and salt and smoke, breaking down the meat in a way that makes it that kind of smoother, softer, creamier ham texture. So ½ ounce to 1 ounce of my curing mix per pound, 3 days in the fridge or similar temperature weather per pound, just to soak it down, suck the salt up and everything. Then you can age it usually after that, after the curing process, they're usually aged for 3 to 6 months to get a really nice quality ham. Now I'm going to head on out and we're going to talk about the smoker. I got some cheese in the smoker going and I got to check on it. Alright, here's my homemade smoker that I rigged up out of a old propane smoker. Got a wood stove here on the bottom and got a little chimney piping up. Just putting in some red oak here. It's a good smoke and it's what I got. So it's what I'm using. When you're talking about preservation from smoke, it does not matter what kind of smoke you're using, really, what kind of wood. It all works to help. Some more than others. It all helps. What are we running temperature-wise? After I stoked it, we're maybe at 40 degrees. And once this wood catches better, I will tone it down and it'll be back to running closer to 35 to 40 degrees in this box. So at that point, I mean, it's well out of the spoilage range, but I can sit there and smoke it all day long. This is not cooking, not like your Traeger smokers, you know, where it's a grill. You're cooking it with a little bit of smoke. This is And look at that smoke piping out the top there, and I can put out 5, 6, 7, 10 times as much smoke if I really work at it. So I can smoke a lot real quick with a traditional setup like this. And to just coat the meat down with a nice heavy smoke layer for preservation, get this thing churning a lot of smoke. I only need it in there for maybe 30 minutes, and that's enough, really. I might do up to an hour, but at that point, with this kind of setup, it's burning a lot of wood, putting out a lot of smoke, so it doesn't take that long. Really, all I'm using this thing for is for putting up a nice layer of smoke to help preserve the meat chemically and keep those bacteria counts down. All right, it is freezing out here. I'm gonna run back inside quick. Boy, this thing smells good. All right, well, we gotta get ready to pack up here and get running, so I got stuff to do. I guess I'll catch you later. Bye now.